Now let's look at the last section that we're going to cover in this class, which is 7.5 dot product. And we're actually only going to cover a couple topics in this section. So one is on the dot product, which is how you multiply vectors together. So if you have this vector v and this vector w, the dot product, multiplying them together, is basically multiplying the first values together, a1 times a2, and then multiplying the second values together, b1 times b2. So that's the first formula. The other formula that we're going to use is this, that cosine of theta is equal to v dot w over the magnitude of v times the magnitude of w. And this second formula is the one we're going to use to find the angle between two vectors. Both of these formulas you are going to have access to on the formula sheet for the exam. So what I want you to be able to do is just know when to use these formulas and how to use these formulas. Let's look at example 1. So this example is about using the dot product. So here we're given two vectors, v and w. And first we want to find v dot w. The first thing is to multiply the first values, or the a values, together. So that would be -3 times 10. And then multiplying the second values together. So that would be 5 times -8. So that would equal -30 minus 40. So the answer is -70. We can also do the dot product of v times v, and that would be -3 times -3 plus 5 times 5. So that's 9 plus 25, which is 34. Now in example 2, this is the second thing that we're going to look at in this section, which is how you find the angle between two vectors. So I'm actually going to go ahead and try and graph each vector first. So I'm going to start each vector at the origin 0, 0. So vector v moves 12 in the x direction. So I guess that'd be a little bit off screen here, and -5 in the y direction. That would be a point right about here. Let me erase the first dot. So vector v, if I draw it, will look something like this. And if we try to draw vector w, so that's going to be -3 in the x direction, -4 in the y direction. This is vector w. So what we're trying to find is this angle theta between these two vectors. So we're going to go ahead and use that formula from the previous page. I'm going to go ahead and write it down again. So cosine theta is equal to v dot w over the magnitude of v times the magnitude of w. So let's find each individual part and then we'll put it all together. So first let's do the dot product. So v dot w in this case, and if you want to, for any of the vectors, you can always change them to component form if you prefer to work with them in the component form. And so for the dot product, we've got 12 times -3 plus -5 times -4. So we get -36 plus 20, or -16. And then now let's find the magnitude for each one. So the magnitude for v is the square root of 12 squared plus -5 squared, and I'm just going to write down the work first. Magnitude of w would be the square root of -3 squared plus -4 squared. Remember that magnitude is basically the same as the hypotenuse of the triangle. And so we get that the magnitude of V is 13 and the magnitude of W is 5. So let's go ahead and plug all that into the formula. So the negative 16 we're going to plug into the numerator. The 13 and 5 we'll plug into the denominator. Plugging that in, we get that cosine of theta is equal to negative 16 over 13 times 5. Or we get that cosine theta is equal to negative 16 over 65. What we really want is not what cosine of theta is, we want theta, because theta is the angle between those two vectors. So at this point, what we need to use is inverse cosine. Theta is going to equal inverse cosine of negative 16 over 65, and we can go ahead and plug that into the calculator. And when we do that, we get that theta is approximately 104.25 degrees.